One of the more divisive topics in model rating is the topic of pre-orders. And I was minded of these recently when I got a bunch of my Atlas pre-orders in, and there was a recent failure of a model manufacturer that took pre-orders and has left a lot of modelers in the lurch. Pre-orders generally make it less risky for the manufacturer, but also put a certain amount of risk on the modeler, the buyer, both for terms of availability, monetary, and time. And as in a modeler, you have to decide on all three of those together. Is that pre-order worth the risk? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it works all right, and sometimes people get burned. Now, for some background, in the past, manufacturers just produced smaller runs of continually available equipment. If you wanted a Santa Fe GP9, you could always get one. They just produced a few of them here and continuous runs and kept all their stock up. But over time, and of course, and if you wanted a specific GP9 for a specific era and specific time, then you had to do that detail painting and detailing yourself. But over time, there was more of a call for more road-specific, series-specific type of detailing. And manufacturers have responded to that across the board. But that also means that the runs, they can't necessarily keep 15 different stock numbers on one particular engine. And they can't do the same runs they did before, 5,000, 10,000 units, let's say, because that creates too much of a risk that they actually might end up stuck with a lot. They ideally want to sell out, but they also want this enough stuff available. In some manufacturers that hadn't really mattered with. Cato did a lot of this in the 90s. They would just produce stuff, and then and you had a bunch, fend for yourself. Certain things like the GP50 or the C30-7, U30-C, those diesels, there weren't that many of them. And regardless if you put an order or reservation in or not, your shop may or may not get one. Or they might say, well, we're going to give you a shop only a quarter of what you ordered, just because of the demand. Pre-orders allow the manufacturer to gauge if they can offer more for pieces of equipment that are more popular, but that also allow us to do smaller runs of less popular, or maybe more specific. So this allows the kind of that environment that we are in today. Under the current pre-order model, generally when a manufacturer will announce something, they're going to offer a time window, 30, 60, 90 days, or let's say, and then everybody who wants one will have to put an order in with their local shops. At the end of the time, the shops will give all the orders to the manufacturer, and then they will use that as a gauge to produce. And of course, some hobby shops, not all of them, some will think, okay, might be a popular model. They may add, their general practice may be, we're just going to add an extra 5 units, let's say, for every one, just have some extra stock, knowing that not everybody orders all at the same time. So this actually kind of gets into that first type of risk when you're doing pre-orders or deciding not to do a pre-order, and that works the other way to your two, is that risk of that availability risk. Because you can choose as well, I say, well, I can pre-order, I can pretty much guarantee I can get one, but if I say I don't like pre-orders just in principle, then you're going to take availability risk. Is that stock going to be available when the order comes in? Some runs, say like the recent N-scale Atlas GP20s, those were essentially sold out from the factory. So there's really no available stock. Would be no available stock at the distributor level. So a shop that did not order any for any reason couldn't get any. And it's also possible that a lot of the stock going to a particular shop may not have been available. So it's also you can get to that issue where none is available, and the models just kind of disappear into the ether, and you never see them. Unfortunately, it does create some issues of availability. For example, I had put an order in for one of these Atlas sound-equipped Burlington Northern RS3s. Now, those were announced a number of years ago, but a couple of years ago, I wasn't interested in getting a Burlington Northern RS3. Only my recent interest of the BN and actually creating a multi-era type layout where I can change the arrows on the layout, and I'll link a link to that in my in the video. But I was interested in that, but now I am. So we need to have one. And then the pre-orders were still available. I put one in. They said, well, it's outside the pre-order window. You may or may not get it. Well, in reality, it came out. Didn't get it because it's come and gone. So, oh well. I'll have to find that on the secondary market. So Broadway Limited came out with the Southern Pacific Alco PA2, and I didn't want to pay the $500 for an ABA set at the time. And I said, okay, now I'll just wait on the secondary market to get this up. Well, those engines were released and they just disappeared. Never found one, even on the secondary market. I had to wait a number of years for the second run to come out, and this is what I was not going to follow my mistake of the previous time. So that's what I got. So I had to wait again to get a second run. So sometimes if this occurs, and do runs of the same engines or same schemes, every different number, you'll be okay. However, sometimes things don't necessarily work out that smooth. Just because you place a pre-order doesn't necessarily mean you'll actually get it. So, there's sometimes I had, as another example, I had replaced some Athearn had announced some of their PS2 3-bay covered hoppers, and I ordered a number of roads, except that there's one of them. There was from Warhauser. Did not get it. The hobby shop got none of them, and so it was an option. Well, I left that open for a while. Then finding out through a third party is that those were so popular, pretty much the run got sold out before it ended up getting shorted. So shops like mine got shorted, and then they got nothing. And that model's been popular and is now sold out. So that one again, if I want it, it'll have to be on the secondary market. Another example of this, I had back in 2017, Atlas had announced a run of Southern Pacific Black Widow SD9s. The last time they ran a Black Widow SD9 was 1989 when they came out with the model. And back then, I was in college. I could not afford the model. So I'd waited, and of course they did other schemes, but never did Black Widow on an SD9. When 2017 rolls around, they announced them, and of course back then there was the DCC equipped, and of course I jumped on it. I probably ordered within a minute of seeing it, hopped on the computer and pre-ordered it. Great, thought it was great, but done. Well, 2019 passed, 2 years passed. I asked Atlas at an NMRA show, and they said, well, there was some issue with the frames, some molding issues, and I didn't know. And then years, and so 21, 22, and the years just kind of rolled along. And said, well, they're still shown as partially pre-order available or sold out. And occasionally I would see one pop up on secondary market and think, well, are these things made or not? And clearly there's not that many of them out there. At the time, Bachmann did come out with a run of Black Widow SD9s. I thought, well, even the numbers, really the acronystics, the 1956 number versus my 1955 number, I thought, I'm going to get it just in case, because the Atlas ones, and I wasn't sure I'm going to get them. Well, luckily I did. At the very least, I have a sound-equipped SD9, and I had to run this one by itself for quite some time. It was only since recently, last year, I happened to be in a Portland area hobby shop and happened to find, here's a SD9 Silver Series, which I immediately saw and purchased. I only happened to wait. Now, this whole thing, I got my technically pre-order satisfied, more or less, but it only took me 8 years to do so. So sometimes you can get lucky. Sometimes things disappear. You can never never find one if a rerun is never done. So this gets into that second kind of risk is monetary, and generally probably the biggest issue around the whole pre-order is just in general. For most people, it's all about just giving a credit card to your favorite shop, and then when the order comes in, your item will get charged. It's important to note that since pre-orders typically you're going to be probably a couple of years, use that time to save up funds, because again you don't necessarily know the circumstances are going to be that you're going to have when that order comes in. As an example, I was selling a property and buying another one. Well, I had a case where the sales fell through, and I had to carry two mortgages for a period of time. And I had some pre-orders that fell into the middle of that, and I pretty much had to plead with the hobby shop to drop them because I couldn't afford them at the time. Which are things that I wanted, but I had to let them go. So I didn't want to fall into that. Since that point forward, I've always had saved up the money ahead of time, and not to let that kind of issue ever show up again. Now, sometimes some shops, not all of them, will require you to put a deposit down, and it can be anywhere from like 1 to 10%, and that's mainly because they've probably been burned in the past, of which too many people placed pre-orders and then didn't pick them up because they forgot about them, or they decided don't want them anymore, and so they were stuck with the bag. And it's great if the shop can resell it. That's great. If not, if they're potentially out, they are out funds. So while you may not want to do that, there are plenty of shops out there that don't require pre-orders that you can do. So you as a modeler, you have that flexibility. Now, however, some manufacturers do require upfront payment, and then, of course, this will place a bigger risk on the customer. Now, if the manufacturer has a good communication, and they produce good quality, and they produce things on time, after a while you can get that kind of trust type relationship, and then you can figure out, okay, is that worth it to me to put that risk in up front? An example of an upfront manufacturer is Railsmith, and they do passenger cars for different roads and different trains. However, these guys do update the web page frequently. There's Facebook Lives, there's blog posts. They answer their email. They're at shows. You can ask them a question, and you can feel pretty. I feel pretty good about keeping. Whatever something's announced, I'll just order it. I don't have to worry about it. And generally, and now there is stock available post pre-order if you don't want to. For certain things like these dome sleepers, for instance, have never ever been produced in N scale before, or things like the Southern Pacific blunt end sleepers. There's very limited stock available, and they will sell out quick. So if you order from stock, you can potentially miss out. And there's no guarantee that they'll do reruns of these either. Sometimes might do multiple reruns, maybe the dome sleepers, but they might not do some of these other ones, as for example, or maybe not necessarily in the same paint scheme. Now, of course, sometimes it can go all very wrong. And this gets with what I said in the introduction. We have the current case of KR Models out of Canada. Now, the KR Models was generally a firm that produced generally for the British market, mostly OO. However, I did note they did announce a 2-truck shay for the North American market, and they required a 100% upfront payment. But over the years, it seems that there were a number of models were beset by mechanical issues. There were some warranty issues around detail, accuracy. Some of the timelines started stretching out, 3-4 years. And eventually what happened was that then the stock that they had in their warehouses weren't selling. And then there wasn't enough money available to pay the China factory for the new run of shades that were announced they were ready to be shipped. But so the company didn't have the money to pay for its newly manufactured equipment, so they pretty much ended up shutting down. And of course, that anybody who placed pre-orders, only way to get your money back is do a chargeback against your credit card. Again, that's kind of a pain, or risk being a secondary or an unsecured creditor, which you might end up being paying pennies on the dollar on your pre-orders. For example of this, we had Concor, who did done N scale products. They were very very prominent in the N scale scene in the 70s, 80s, 80s and 90s. They are still around today. But back in the 90s, they actually had announced a Southern Pacific AC-12 cab forward, but that sounds great and all, but they wanted $500 up front for it. It was like in a sense, a crowd-funded project, and a lot of people balked at that. I wasn't going to put down $500 for that. Mainly based on the fact that I had warranty repairs that took me years to turn around, so I wasn't willing to give them money for money like that. But in the end, I guess a lot of people felt the same way, and so these models were never made. But it took years between the time that people put their pre-orders in and time they got any refunds. This gets into the third type is time risk. Again, is how long do you wait? Is the stretching timeline to 2 years is not long enough? You like pre-orders? Figure there's no problem with the 2 years, or if it's okay if it goes 3 years, 4 years. I'd note that on Atlas's production schedule, there's some items there from 2020, 21. So it kind of make you wonder, are these ever going to get done since they've been lapped by many other products? Intermountain has fallen into this as far as the N-scale market is concerned. Their pre-order windows there's no predefined end. They go 30 days, 90 days, they're years. I had put some orders in for some Southern Pacific chassis daylight passenger cars. It took 10 years for them to show up, and when they were completely painted, the colors were completely off and painted them. I pretty much refused to pay for them because it's not going to pay for garbage. Another time, they had announced a 60-foot flat car. At the time, I was modeling the late 60s. Took them 10 plus years. In fact, that was so long, I decided I was going to move my rare up to 1955. The hobby shop I ordered them from, they said, these guys never produced. They just cancel all of them. And Intermountain did produce them, but it was a few years after that. Reluctantly put a pre-order in with Intermountain for some 40-foot PFE Gothic refrigerator cars. This is a Microtrains version, a weathered one. I want something that's a bit newer looking, and it's not as weathered, more appropriate for a 60s type, mid-60s operation. But I know that the Intermountain version of this car is probably going to be not 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So I've resigned to having it for a long period of time. So there's no guarantee that I will ever get that. There's a good chance that Intermountain will not get enough orders and they'll just cancel it 5 years from now. So that's a lot of the risk I have to take with that particular manufacturer. So given all the potential availability risk of taking a pre-order or not doing pre-orders, the potentially money outlays anywhere from a credit card or maybe all the way up to a full payment, and then the overall time. Some folks, if you're older, you may ask, well, am I going to be alive when this pre-order comes? If it takes a decade for every model, it's hard to say. Nobody knows for that. Or is my interest, people's interests don't stay static. So maybe you like something now, but 10 years from now, you're still waiting on the same model. Are you still doing the same thing, same road, same era? As an example. So there's those particular risks. So I'd like to know, in far as if you could add some comments on this on this video. So do you generally, in principle, do pre-orders, or is it more conditional? Some manufacturers, yeah, no problem, but some others, no way. If you never dealt with them before, or generally you don't do pre-orders, you just take a risk and you figure, hey, I've had pretty good luck finding stuff on the secondary market. And then also that if you do pre-orders, how long do you keep them active? Is this a couple years, or do you give more points as per se if their communication is kept up and say, yeah, it's coming, or you take them at their word, or you just going to say, it's been too long, I'm not going to have all my money, even though it's not, I didn't spend money out front, it's all basically held up or reserved already of stuff that you don't know is when it is ever going to go up, and you'd rather put that money elsewhere. So if you like this video, please give me a like, and consider subscribing for more of these discussion type topics. And thank you for watching.